The woman of my son called the police because I am raising their children incorrectly and sued me for ignoring her messages. Hi Reddit. I'm reaching out because I feel like I've lost something deeply important to me, and I'm struggling to understand how it all fell apart. My name is Linda, I'm 56, and for years, I've had a close bond with my son Jacob, who's 34, and his wife Megan, who's 32. Megan and I shared an arrangement that felt perfect. It revolved around taking care of their two kids, Harper, who's now 7, and Noah, who's 5. Everything about it felt easy and right, until it wasn't. When the pandemic turned life upside down in 2020, Jacob and Megan were suddenly overwhelmed. Megan worked in marketing and Jacob in IT, and while both could work remotely, the demands of managing two small kids at home were overwhelming. I had recently retired and lived just 10 minutes away. Offering to help wasn't just natural, it felt like the right thing to do for my family. Megan seemed genuinely relieved when I suggested a plan to share the childcare. I'd watch the kids for a week, then she'd take the next week. We alternated like that, and the system worked so well, it became routine. Spending time with Harper and Noah brought me so much joy. Harper is this bright, spirited girl who could talk your ear off about anything, and Noah has such a sweet, gentle personality. I cherished those days with them, and Megan and I grew closer, too. We text constantly, sometimes just to share silly memes or chat about the kids' latest milestones. On weekends, we'd sometimes cook together or dive into some show on Netflix. I felt like we were more than in-laws, we were friends. For 3 years, this routine was seamless. The kids were thriving, Megan could focus on her job without worrying about daycare costs, and I felt deeply connected to my family. But a few months ago, a small disagreement sparked something I never saw coming. It all started when I took the kids to the park near my house. It's a park we've gone to dozens of times, so I didn't think twice about it. Harper was excited to play on the monkey bars, and Noah, being the little explorer he is, wanted to do everything his big sister was doing. But Noah got fussy halfway through, so I sat him down with some snacks while keeping an eye on Harper. Later that evening, I casually mentioned to Megan that Harper had been playing on the monkey bars. She froze mid-sentence, her expression instantly changing. She told me she didn't feel comfortable with Harper playing on those because they were too dangerous. I was surprised. Harper had climbed on them before without any issue. I reassured Megan that I'd been watching closely and that Harper was fine, but she didn't seem to hear me. Instead, she started asking questions: where I was standing, what exactly Harper was doing, whether Noah was being supervised the entire time. The conversation felt tense in a way that was unfamiliar. Megan seemed irritated, even accusatory. I felt like I was being cross-examined over something trivial. The more I tried to explain, the more frustrated she became. By the end of it, we weren't really talking anymore. We were arguing. She insisted that she needed to feel safe about where her kids were and said I should have called her first to check if the monkey bars were okay. I felt hurt and blindsided. I've always been careful with the kids, and to have her question my judgment like that stung. After that day, things started to shift. Megan became more distant. Our texts grew less frequent, and when we did talk, her tone was clipped. She began picking at little things: what snacks I gave the kids, how long they napped, whether I let them watch TV. It was like I couldn't do anything right anymore. I tried to address it gently, asking if something else was bothering her, but she always brushed it off, saying everything was fine. The breaking point came a few weeks later when Megan abruptly told me that she and Jacob had decided to put the kids in daycare. She said it was best for everyone because they wanted more structure for the kids and needed a consistent schedule. I was stunned. We had never talked about daycare before, and the timing felt too coincidental. I asked if this had anything to do with our argument, but she denied it, saying it was just about what was right for the family. I felt devastated. The kids had been such a huge part of my life, and suddenly, they weren't. It felt like a door was slammed shut without warning. I tried talking to Jacob, hoping he could help me understand, but he just said Megan wanted this and he supported her decision. He didn't seem to want to get involved in the tension between us. Since then, Megan has kept her distance. Family dinners are awkward. She barely looks at me, and when she does, her eyes are cold. Jacob seems caught in the middle, trying to smooth things over, but clearly unwilling to take sides. And the kids, I miss them so much. I still see them occasionally, but it's different now. Short visits, no more overnights or lazy afternoons at the park. I can't stop replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Was it really about the monkey bars? Or was there something else brewing that I didn't see? Megan and I had such a strong connection. Losing that feels like losing a piece of myself. I want to fix this, but I don't know if I can. Has anyone been through something like this? Is there any hope of repairing a relationship that feels so completely broken? Hi Reddit, I'm back again, and this time, things have taken an even sharper turn for the worse. I'm Linda, and for those who don't know, I've had a complicated relationship with my daughter-in-law Megan, especially when it comes to childcare arrangements. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted completely, you'll understand what I'm going through. Let me tell you what happened. This all started after we had a big blow-up a few months back. Things had cooled down a little since then, at least on the surface, but the relationship was far from repaired. Megan and I weren't texting like we used to, and there was a tension in the air every time we spoke. Still, I thought we were at least keeping it civil for the sake of the kids, Harper, 7, and Noah, 5. I was wrong. Last Thursday morning started like any other. I work part-time at a local library a few days a week, and I had a morning shift that day. The night before, I had texted Megan to confirm that she'd be watching my grandkids, Lily, 6, and Ethan, 3, for a few hours while I was at work. She usually helped me out on those mornings. It was part of the mutual childcare arrangement we'd had going for years, although admittedly, it had been rockier since our argument. I sent her a quick, "Hey, still good for tomorrow," message before heading to bed. When I woke up, there was a text from Megan, but I didn't bother reading it closely. I was in a rush, trying to get the kids ready. Ethan was being fussy about his shoes, and Lily decided that morning was the perfect time to give me a detailed lecture about her favorite dinosaur. I glanced at the notification, saw Megan's name, and assumed it was her usual sure, no problem response. I bundled the kids into the car, drove over to Megan and Jacob's house, dropped them off at the front door, and waved goodbye. Megan opened the door, gave me a strange look, but didn't say anything. I figured she was just having a bad morning. It happens to all of us, and didn't think much of it. Big mistake. I went to work, completely unaware of the storm brewing back at their house. About an hour into my shift, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Megan, and this time, I opened it fully. Her message was scathing. She said she had specifically told me not to bring the kids over, that she wasn't available to babysit because she had a work deadline. She accused me of being inconsiderate, of ignoring her boundaries, and of dumping my responsibilities onto her without even asking properly. My stomach dropped. I immediately scrolled back to our conversation from the night before. There it was, clear as day. "Sorry, I can't tomorrow, super busy with work." I had completely missed it in my rush. I felt a wave of guilt, followed quickly by panic. What was happening with Lily and Ethan right now? I tried calling Megan, but she didn't pick up. I called Jacob, and he didn't answer either. My heart was racing. Finally, Megan texted back, "I'm not watching them. Come get your kids." I left work immediately, muttering a half-baked excuse to my manager, and sped over to their house. When I got there, the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. The kids were sitting on the front porch with their backpacks, looking confused and upset. Megan wasn't even home. She had left them outside, unsupervised, while she went to a coffee shop to work. I was furious. I scooped up the kids, trying to reassure them while barely holding back my own anger. Lily kept asking why Aunt Megan was mad at me, and Ethan was on the verge of tears. It broke my heart. I couldn't believe she would just leave them like that, her own niece and nephew, sitting on the porch like they didn't matter. Later that evening, I called Megan to confront her. She answered on the third ring, and her tone was icy. I asked her how she could leave 2 small children alone like that, and her response floored me. She said it wasn't her responsibility to fix my mistake and that I should have checked her message properly. She claimed she had no choice but to leave because her work was more important than my lack of planning. I told her that whatever issues we had between us, the kids shouldn't suffer for it. Her response? "Maybe you should learn to take care of your own kids instead of expecting me to pick up the slack." The conversation spiraled from there. We dredged up old grievances, her issues with the way I've handled things in the past, my frustration with her nitpicking and lack of communication. It wasn't productive. By the end, we were both shouting, and she hung up on me. I didn't know what to do next. Jacob called me later that night, trying to play peacemaker, but he was clearly siding with Megan. He said I needed to apologize for disrespecting her boundaries and for dumping the kids on her without proper notice. I tried explaining that it was an honest mistake, but he just kept repeating Megan's talking points. It felt like he was reading from a script. The whole situation has left me feeling raw and unmoored. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering how we got here. Megan and I used to be so close. I trusted her with my kids, and she trusted me with hers. Now it feels like we're enemies. I'm also struggling with how to explain this to Lily and Ethan. They keep asking why they can't see Aunt Megan as much anymore. How do I tell them that the adults in their lives can't get along? It's not their fault, but they're the ones caught in the middle. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and I'm lost. I don't know how to fix this, or if it's even possible to fix. Have any of you been through something like this? How do you rebuild trust with someone who feels like a stranger now? Hi Reddit. It feels like my life has completely spiraled out of control, and I don't even know where to begin. I'm Linda, 56, and I've been struggling with an increasingly hostile relationship with my daughter-in-law Megan, especially around childcare for my grandkids, Harper and Noah. Things were already tense between us after a series of misunderstandings and arguments, but what happened recently took it to a whole new level, one I could never have imagined. It all started a few weeks ago. I was watching Harper, 7, and Noah, 5, at my house while Megan worked. She dropped them off in the morning, and everything seemed normal. Harper was reading her favorite book about horses, and Noah was busy stacking his Lego blocks into what he proudly declared was the world's biggest tower. I thought we were having a good day. Around lunchtime, Megan texted me out of the blue, saying she'd be late picking up the kids because of a meeting. This wasn't unusual. She often had last-minute changes to her schedule. I told her it wasn't a problem, but as the afternoon wore on, her texts started to get strange. She was short with me, almost rude, and when I asked if everything was okay, she just said, "Fine, be there soon." Something felt off. It was nearly 8 p.m. when Megan finally arrived. She didn't come inside to get the kids, just honked from the driveway like she was in some kind of rush. I helped Harper and Noah gather their things, and when we got to the car, Megan barely looked at me. She didn't even say thank you, which was unlike her, even with all the tension lately. As they drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I was at home catching up on laundry when there was a loud knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. My heart sank. For a moment, I thought something had happened to Jacob or Megan or the kids. But the officers weren't there to deliver bad news. They were there for me. "Ma'am, are you Linda Taylor?" one of them asked, his expression unreadable. I nodded, my mind racing. "Yes. Is something wrong?" "We received a report about possible child abandonment involving your grandchildren, Harper and Noah." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "What? That's ridiculous. I've been taking care of them." The officer cut me off, holding up his hand. "We're going to need to ask you some questions. Can we come inside?" I was too stunned to refuse. They stepped into my living room, and I noticed one of them glancing around, taking in the neatly arranged toys and the framed photos of my family on the walls. I kept trying to explain that there must have been some kind of mistake, but they insisted on going through the formalities. They asked me where the kids had been the day before, how long they'd been in my care, and what time Megan had picked them up. I answered everything as honestly as I could, but the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Why would anyone think I had abandoned my grandchildren? Then one of the officers dropped the bombshell. The mother, Megan Taylor, reported that you left the children unattended for hours. She claims you weren't home when she arrived to pick them up. My jaw practically hit the floor. That's not true. I was here the entire time. She honked from the driveway. I walked the kids out to her car myself. The officers exchanged a look, and I could tell they weren't sure what to believe. "Do you have any proof of that?" one of them asked. I felt a surge of panic. Proof? I didn't exactly have security cameras documenting my every move. All I had was my word, and Megan's version of events clearly painted me as negligent. As the officers continued their questioning, Harper and Noah's voices echoed in my mind. Harper had been so proud of her book report on horses. Noah had begged me to take a picture of his Lego tower. It didn't make sense. Why would Megan do this? She knew I loved those kids more than anything. Before they left, the officers informed me that a report would be filed with Child Protective Services. My stomach churned at the thought. I'd spent my entire career as an educator, dedicating my life to children's well-being. Now my reputation was at risk because of a lie. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and disbelief. I tried calling Jacob to get some answers, but he was evasive. He claimed he didn't know the details of what Megan had told the police and suggested I let things cool down. Let things cool down? My relationship with my grandchildren was hanging by a thread, and he wanted me to sit quietly and wait? I felt betrayed, not just by Megan, but by my own son. Then came the visit from CPS. A social worker named Carla showed up at my door to conduct an interview and inspect my home. She was polite but thorough, asking about everything from my childcare practices to the layout of my house. She even spoke to Harper and Noah, which was the hardest part for me. The kids were visibly scared, clinging to me and asking why the lady was asking so many questions. I had to fight back tears as I reassured them that everything was okay. Carla's visit ended with her saying that they'd be in touch once they'd completed their investigation. It felt like a hollow reassurance. My entire life was under scrutiny now, all because Megan had decided to weaponize a false accusation. Over the next week, I started piecing together what had really happened. Through mutual friends and bits of gossip, I learned that Megan had been venting about me to her co-workers, claiming I was overstepping and unreliable. One mutual acquaintance even mentioned that Megan had joked about teaching me a lesson. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about concern for the kids. It was about control. But Megan hadn't anticipated one thing. Harper. That little girl is smart. Smarter than most adults I know. And she remembered everything about that day. When Carla asked her if I'd been home, Harper told her exactly what had happened. She even described the snacks I'd given them and the way I'd helped her buckle her seatbelt when Megan picked them up. Noah, in his own innocent way, backed up his sister's account. Their honesty was my saving grace. When CPS closed the case, I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. The damage to my reputation was already done. Whispers started spreading in my community, and some of my former colleagues looked at me differently, as if they weren't sure whether to believe the accusations. I could see the doubt in their eyes, even though I'd been cleared of any wrongdoing. As for Megan, she doubled down. She refused to apologize and insisted she'd done what any concerned mother would do. Jacob, ever the peacemaker, tried to convince me to forgive her, but how could I? She had tried to destroy me, to paint me as a neglectful grandmother, and for what? A petty power play? Hi Reddit, it's Linda again, and at this point, I'm not sure if there's any way to salvage what's left of my family dynamics. After everything that's happened, the arguments, the accusations, the police showing up at my door, it's clear that my relationship with Megan, my daughter-in-law, is beyond repair. And now, to make matters worse, her husband Zach, yes, my own son, has joined her in blaming me for everything. Let me start from the beginning of this latest fiasco. After the false child abandonment report Megan filed against me, I decided I needed to set some boundaries. I thought the case being closed and CPS clearing my name would give me some peace of mind, but it didn't. Megan didn't apologize or even acknowledge the damage she caused, not just to me, but to Harper, 7, and Noah, 5, who were terrified by the whole ordeal. Instead, she acted as if nothing had happened, like it was business as usual. That's when I realized I couldn't continue the childcare arrangement. I loved my grandkids dearly, but I couldn't subject myself to that level of manipulation and disrespect any longer. When Megan texted me a few days later asking if I could watch Harper and Noah the following week, I didn't even hesitate. I responded simply, "I'm sorry, but I won't be able to help with childcare anymore." I thought keeping it short and polite would soften the blow, but I should have known better. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. It was Megan. "Linda," she started, her tone dripping with fake concern. "Is everything okay? You've never said no before." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Megan, I think it's best if we don't continue the childcare arrangement. After everything that's happened, I need to take a step back. Her voice immediately shifted to something colder, sharper. After everything that's happened? You mean after you ignored my boundaries and caused this whole mess? That was it. I'd had enough. Megan, you filed a false report against me. You involved the police and CPS. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? To my reputation? To the kids? She scoffed. I did what I had to do to protect my children. If you'd communicated better, none of this would have happened. The conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match. Megan accused me of being selfish and unreliable, while I reminded her that I'd spent years bending over backward to help her and Zach. When I finally hung up, my hands were shaking. I knew Megan wouldn't take my decision well, but I didn't expect the level of venom she unleashed. Later that evening, Zach called me. I was relieved at first, hoping he might be more understanding, but I couldn't have been more wrong. He started off calmly enough, saying he wanted to talk things through, but it quickly became clear that he was firmly on Megan's side. Mom, Megan told me about your decision, and I have to say, I'm really disappointed, he began. You know how much we've relied on you. This isn't just about Megan. It's about the kids. They love spending time with you. I love them too, I said, my voice trembling. But I can't keep putting myself in a position where I'm disrespected and accused of things I didn't do. Zach, she called the police on me. Do you understand how serious that is? He sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. Mom, she was scared. You should have just communicated better instead of making her feel like she had no choice. That was the moment I realized how deeply Megan had manipulated him. Zach, she lied. There was no reason for her to involve the police, and you know it, but he wouldn't budge. Instead, he started accusing me of stirring up drama and creating problems for their family. He even implied that my decision to stop babysitting was some kind of petty revenge tactic. By the time the call ended, I felt utterly defeated. Over the next few days, things escalated even further. Megan started spreading rumors about me within our extended family and social circles. At first, it was subtle, little comments about how I was unreliable or difficult to work with, but it didn't take long for her to go all in. She told people I'd abandoned Harper and Noah, painting me as some kind of heartless grandmother who didn't care about her family. One afternoon, I got a call from my sister, Carol. Linda, she said cautiously, I just heard something concerning. Megan told Sarah that you refused to babysit Harper and Noah because you were too busy with your own life. Is that true? I felt my blood boil. No, Carol, that's not true. I stopped babysitting because Megan called the police on me. She accused me of abandoning the kids when she knows that's a lie. Carol was shocked, but it was clear the damage had already been done. Megan's version of events was spreading like wildfire, and I could feel people starting to question me. It was humiliating. Meanwhile, Zach and Megan began sending me guilt-tripping texts almost daily. The kids miss you. One message read, do you really want them to think you don't care about them? Another said, we're struggling without your help. Don't you care about your own family? Each message felt like a dagger to the heart, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into backing down. The final straw came during a family gathering at my nephew's birthday party. I debated whether to go at all, knowing Megan and Zach would be there, but I didn't want to miss seeing the rest of my family. When I arrived, everything seemed fine at first. Harper and Noah ran up to me with big smiles, and for a moment, I felt like everything might be okay. But then Megan approached me, her expression icy. Linda, she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, can we talk? I reluctantly followed her to a quieter corner, where she immediately launched into an attack. You've put us in an impossible position, she hissed. Zach's been working overtime to cover the extra childcare costs, and I've had to cut back on my hours. Do you even care about what you've done to our family? I tried to stay calm, but her words cut deep. Megan, I've done more for you and Zach than most people would. I've given you years of my time and energy, but I can't keep putting myself in a position where I'm disrespected and treated like a villain. She didn't back down. This isn't about you, Linda. This is about the kids. They're the ones suffering because of your stubbornness. I couldn't take it anymore. No, Megan, they're suffering because of you. You're the one who turned this into a war. You're the one who involved the police and spread lies about me. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." By the time the party ended, the tension was palpable. Other family members were giving me sympathetic looks, but no one dared confront Megan directly. I left feeling more isolated than ever. After I refused to renew the childcare agreement with Megan and Zach, I thought they would figure out a solution on their own. Megan had made it clear that she saw me as the problem, so I assumed she'd stop leaning on me for support. But instead of accepting my boundaries, they decided to target someone else. My 78-year-old mother, Carol. My mom is a kind and loving woman who has always gone out of her way to help family, even when it's not convenient for her. She's the type of person who will drop everything if someone needs her, no questions asked. But what Megan and Zach did to her was beyond taking advantage. It was outright exploitation. It started a couple of weeks after our last big argument. I was over at Mom's house, helping her with some yard work, when she casually mentioned that Harper and Noah had been spending a lot of time with her lately. "Megan dropped them off again this morning," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "They're sweet kids, but I wasn't expecting them today." Alarm bells immediately went off in my head. "Mom, what do you mean she dropped them off? Did she ask you ahead of time?" Mom hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. "Well, not exactly. She just called me on her way to work and said she was in a pinch." I didn't want to say no. I felt a knot form in my stomach. My mother has high blood pressure and arthritis, and she's not in any condition to be chasing after two energetic kids all day. "Mom, you can't let them take advantage of you like this. It's not safe for you to watch them." She shrugged it off, like she always does. "Oh, it's fine, Linda. They're family." But it wasn't fine, not by a long shot. Over the next few weeks, Megan and Zach started leaving Harper and Noah with my mom more and more frequently. Sometimes they'd call her in advance, but often they wouldn't. They'd just show up at her house, drop the kids off, and leave, barely giving her a chance to protest. I confronted Zach about it after I found out they'd left the kids with Mom for an entire weekend while they went on a much-needed couples retreat. "Zach, what are you thinking?" I demanded over the phone. "Mom is almost 80 years old. She can't handle two young kids for days on end." He sounded annoyed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Mom volunteered to help, Linda. She said she didn't mind. That's because she's too polite to say no." I shot back. "You're putting her health at risk, and you know it." His tone turned defensive. "We don't have a lot of options right now, okay? You won't help, and daycare is too expensive. What are we supposed to do?" I was livid. "Figure something out that doesn't involve dumping your responsibilities onto a sick, elderly woman." But my words fell on deaf ears. Zach and Megan continued to use my mom as their default babysitter, even as her health began to decline. I started noticing how tired she looked every time I visited her. She was constantly complaining of headaches and fatigue, but she refused to stand up to them. "They need help, Linda," she kept saying, "and the kids are such sweethearts. I can't turn them away." I felt trapped. I didn't want to upset my mom by pushing her too hard, but I couldn't stand by and watch Megan and Zach exploit her like this. I tried talking to Megan directly, but that was a disaster. She brushed off my concerns, saying, "Your mom seems fine to me. If she couldn't handle it, she'd tell us." It all came to a head last week. I got a frantic call from my mom's neighbor, Mrs. Walker, who said she'd seen an ambulance outside my mom's house. I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest. When I got there, I found my mom hooked up to monitors, looking pale and frail. The doctor told me her blood pressure had spiked dangerously high, and she'd nearly had a stroke. I felt sick with guilt and anger. This never would have happened if Megan and Zach hadn't been putting so much pressure on her. While I was sitting by her bedside, Harper and Noah's voices echoed in my head. I imagined them running around my mom's house, begging for snacks, asking her to play with them, completely unaware of how much strain they were putting on her. It wasn't their fault, they're just kids, but the thought made my blood boil. Later that evening, Zach and Megan showed up at the hospital. I was still reeling from the day's events, and seeing them walk in like nothing was wrong nearly pushed me over the edge. Megan had the audacity to say, "We just heard what happened. Is your mom okay? Is she okay?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. What do you think, Megan? She's in the hospital because of you. Megan looked taken aback, but Zach jumped to her defense. Don't blame this on us, Mom. You're the one who refused to help. We didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. I snapped. And you chose to exploit an elderly woman with health problems instead of figuring out a real solution. Do you even care what you've done to her? Megan crossed her arms and glared at me. We're doing the best we can, Linda. Maybe if you weren't so selfish, this wouldn't have happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? I've spent years helping you too with everything from childcare to finances, and this is how you repay me? By nearly killing my mother? The argument escalated from there, with both sides shouting over each other. Eventually, a nurse came in and told us to lower our voices or leave. Zach and Megan stormed out, muttering about how I was unreasonable and always playing the victim. I stayed by my mom's side, holding her hand and wondering how things had gotten so bad. After my mother, Carol, ended up in the hospital because of the stress Megan and Zach put on her, I knew I couldn't stand by any longer. I'd already refused to renew the childcare arrangement with Megan and Zach, but that hadn't stopped them from dumping their responsibilities onto my sick mother. This wasn't just inconsiderate, it was dangerous. If I didn't intervene, I was terrified that their selfishness might actually kill her. The day my mom was discharged from the hospital, I made sure I was there to bring her home and get her settled. She was still weak, and the doctors had warned her to take it easy. I helped her into her recliner, brought her some tea, and made sure she had everything she needed. Then, just as I was tucking a blanket around her legs, the doorbell rang. It was Megan. She had Harper and Noah with her, and she was holding a diaper bag in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. The moment I opened the door, she smiled like nothing had happened. Hey, Linda, I just need to drop the kids off for a few hours. I've got an appointment downtown, and I'll be back before dinner. I felt my blood pressure spike. Megan, I said firmly, my mom just got out of the hospital. She's not in any condition to watch the kids, and neither am I. Her smile faltered. Oh, come on, it's just for a few hours. They're good kids. They won't be any trouble. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, making it clear she wasn't coming in. No, Megan. This stops now. You cannot keep using my mother as your babysitter, especially when you know how sick she is. Her expression hardened. Well, what am I supposed to do, Linda? I have things I need to get done. You can't expect me to just drop everything. I couldn't believe her audacity. What I expect, I snapped, is for you to take responsibility for your own children. You can't keep dumping them on other people and pretending it's not your problem. We went back and forth for several minutes, with Megan trying every tactic she could think of: guilt, anger, even tears. But I didn't budge. Finally, I said something I never thought I'd have to say to my own daughter-in-law. If you leave those kids here today, Megan, I'll have no choice but to call the police. Do you understand me? She looked at me like I just slapped her. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, crossing my arms. I'm done playing these games. If you abandon your children here, I'll report it. End of story. There was a long, tense silence. Then Megan turned on her heel, grabbed the kids, and marched back to her car. As she drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, and a deep sadness that it had come to this. That incident marked the beginning of the end. Over the next few weeks, the tension between Megan and me reached an all-time high. She and Zach started avoiding me altogether, which was fine by me, but I could tell things were falling apart on their end. Zach stopped returning my calls, and when I did manage to get a hold of him, he sounded stressed and distant. I later found out through a mutual friend that they were having serious financial problems. Between Megan cutting back on work and the mounting cost of daycare, they were barely scraping by. One evening, I got a call from Zach. His voice was quiet and strained. Mom, he said, we've decided to move. I wasn't expecting that. Move? Where? To Megan's parents' place, he replied. They're going to help us get back on our feet. I felt a pang of mixed emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that they'd finally found someone else to lean on. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of sadness that my relationship with Zach, and by extension, my grandkids, had deteriorated so much. When are you leaving? I asked. Next month, he said. We're packing up now. I didn't know what else to say. I hope it works out for you. I finally managed. Take care of yourself. And the kids. The move happened quickly. Before I knew it, their house was empty, and they were gone. It felt strange, like the end of an era. But as the weeks passed, I started to notice something. My life felt quieter, calmer. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or bracing myself for the next crisis. It was liberating. I heard bits and pieces about Zach and Megan's new life through family members. They were living in a small apartment near Megan's parents, and things weren't going well. Zach was working long hours at a warehouse, and Megan had picked up a part-time retail job to help make ends meet. Their marriage was reportedly strained, and they were struggling to adjust to their new reality. As for me, I've been focusing on rebuilding my own life. I've reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and even signed up for a painting class. My relationship with my mother has also improved. We're closer than ever, and I make sure to check in on her regularly. Most importantly, I've set firm boundaries and learned to prioritize my own well-being.